When people talk about Project Hail Mary, most discussions focus on what the film gets right. The friendship between Grace and Rocky, the scientific problem solving, the humor, and the emotional ending. For many viewers, the movie successfully captures the spirit of Andy Weir's novel. And I agree, but there is one tiny flaw in the adaptation that has been bothering me ever since I watched it. It's not a missing subplot. It's not a scientific shortcut. It's not even a pacing issue. It's something much smaller, and paradoxically, much more important. The film weakens the central dilemma of Dr. Ryland Grace. To understand why this matters, we need to talk about what kind of hero Grace actually is. Ryland Grace is not a hero, at least not at first. One of the most interesting things about Andy Weir's novel is that Grace is fundamentally a reluctant hero. Most science fiction protagonists are eager explorers, brave astronauts, or self-sacrificing visionaries. Grace is none of those things. He is a middle school science teacher who wants a quiet life. When humanity faces extinction, he contributes because he loves science, not because he dreams of becoming humanity's savior. And when the moment arrives for true heroism, when he is asked to board the Hail Mary mission, he refuses. That refusal is essential. Many stories present a character who is afraid, but ultimately does the right thing. Project Hail Mary goes further. Grace actually says no. He is not merely tempted to refuse. He refuses. This distinction matters because it establishes the deepest question of the novel. What kind of person is Ryland Grace? The first time the question is asked, Grace fails. He chooses self-preservation. He chooses fear. He chooses survival. Andy Weir could have ended the moral examination there and simply portray Grace as a coward. But that's not what the novel is about. Instead, Weir constructs a fascinating narrative mechanism. The question is asked again, not immediately, not in the same context, not under the same circumstances, but eventually the opportunity for heroism returns. And this is where Grace becomes interesting, because the second time he gives a different answer. At the climax of the novel, Grace has every reason to continue his journey back home. He has completed his mission. He has survived impossible odds. He finally has a chance to return to Earth. Then he discovers Rocky is doomed. And suddenly, the same moral question reappears.
I can go home, or I can save Rocky.
Will he risk his life for others? The circumstances are different, but the dilemma is fundamentally identical. The first time, Grace chooses himself. The second time, he chooses someone else. This is not merely a heroic action. It's a character transformation. The novel isn't telling us that Grace was secretly brave all along. It's telling us that he changed. He grew. He became the person he was not at the beginning. And because the novel spends time exploring his thoughts, fears, and memories, readers can clearly see the transformation happening. The moral arc becomes visible. The movie still shows the events. Grace still saves Rocky. The plot remains intact, but the adaptation gives much less attention to the internal struggle connecting these two moments. As a result, the audiences see the choice, but not necessarily the dilemma, and that is a subtle but meaningful difference. In the novel, the final decision feels like the resolution of a long-running moral argument occurring inside Grace's mind. In the film, it can feel more like a straightforward, heroic moment. The action remains, and the psychology becomes less explicit. This is understandable. Cinema struggles with internal monologue. Books can place us directly inside a character's consciousness for hundreds of pages. Films usually cannot. This doesn't mean that you cannot show the dilemma on screen. My point is that you absolutely should, that you have to. We need the connecting moments between his doubt, his reasoning, and then his answer. In the film, we only get the doubt and then the answer. The dilemma is completely gone. In the book, it doesn't last long either, but we do get to see his struggle, and the reader understands why. It's just a couple of paragraphs, but they illuminate a lot about his dilemma. This is the missing choice in the film. He just does it because of the plot, and we skip his growth as a character. Interestingly, this dilemma places Ryland Grace in the company of one of literature's most famous characters, Hamlet. At first glance, these characters could not be more different. One is a Danish prince contemplating revenge. The other is a science teacher trying to save humanity, but both are defined by a dilemma. For Hamlet, the question is simple. Should he act? He spends the entire play wrestling with that decision. Every scene circles back to the same fundamental problem. Action or inaction. Revenge or hesitation. What makes Hamlet compelling is not the answer, it's the struggle. The audience watches him think. The dilemma becomes the character. Grace operates on a smaller scale, but the principle is similar. His defining question is, will he sacrifice himself for others? The novel allows us to watch him wrestle with that question in a brief but significant manner. In the book, it's just a couple of paragraphs, but they allow us to understand his personal state of mind. Like Hamlet, he's not interesting because the answer is obvious. He is interesting because the answer is difficult. The tension comes from uncertainty. When Grace ultimately chooses Rocky over himself, the novel gives us the satisfaction of seeing the dilemma resolved. The man who once refuses the mission now willingly risks everything. The answer has changed because the character has changed. That is the essence of the character arc. To be clear, this is not a major criticism of the film. Adaptations inevitably loses certain things, and Project Hail Mary remains remarkably faithful in many respects. But this omission matters because it affects the story's deepest theme. The novel is not merely about saving Earth. It's about becoming the kind of person who deserves to save Earth. The science is exciting. The mystery is compelling. The friendship with Rocky is unforgettable. Yet, underneath all of that lies a moral question. Who is Ryland Grace when everything is on the line? Andy Weir's answer is elegant. He asked the question twice. The first answer is no, the second answer is yes. And the distance between those answers is the entire story. The film preserved the destination. The book let us experience the journey. And that's why this tiny flaw stands out. Not because it changes what happened, but because it slightly obscures why it matters. And that's my take on the one tiny flaw in Project Hail Mary's adaptation. A flaw that doesn't break the film, but does make Ryland Grace's character's arc a little less powerful than it is in the novel. What do you think? Did the movie successfully capture Grace's transformation, or do you think the book handled this dilemma better? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video essay, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with other science fiction fans. It really helps the channel grow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.